Hey, what's up, everybody? Flashwing here, coming to you from the garage. And as you can no doubt tell by the title of this video, that this is the third episode of my garage chats. And if you're not familiar with any of these videos, I've done basically two other garage chat videos, which are very simply, instead of doing a typical vlog on the motorcycle and talking to you guys there, wanted to come to you from the garage. Part of the reason why I did the garage chats in the past was the previous two episodes were done while I was in the midst of rebuilding the R1, so I wasn't able to ride. I wanted to vlog, and I kind of compromised by doing one in the RX-8, and the previous one kind of going over some of the build aspects of the R1. So this is the third episode with a rebuilt bike, and I got something a little off the beaten path, but definitely along the lines of some of the things I've been talking about recently to discuss with you guys today. I wanted to talk about a series of posts that I've been working through extensively on a forum called Adventure Riders. And Adventure Riders is basically an international forum of motorcycle riders that do everything from short day trips on 1000cc sport bikes to off-road trips on dirt bikes to some guys even transversing entire continents or even across whole sections of the globe. It's a great website. And I was doing some research and I came across a story about a gentleman out in California who was one of the very first, or if not the first, North American individuals to take possession of an 1199 Ducati Panigale. And the particular aspect of his story which made it very unique was not so much that he was the first to do so, but it's what he did with the bike. And what he did was he took a beautiful, somewhat characteristic, fussy Italian supermodel sport bike and rode it 15,000 miles across the entire United States and up into Canada to Montreal, and did so over the period of about 6 months. The whole aspect of the trip, when I finally caught up, where I first found this article was the notion that that the 1199 had basically done a complete circle of the country. And I realized I had kind of come on this post a little late, but the Adventure Rider Forum does what they call ride reports. And it's very simply people who do write-ups on the rides that they've taken, whether they're short or long, and they're complete with pictures and posts about things that happened, and it's pretty much whatever you want to contribute to it. This ride report was done by a gentleman named Dennis, and Dennis has a screen name. He goes by Anti-Hero, however you want to pronounce it. Dennis, hopefully you have a chance to watch this video. I just want to make sure that I put out there that my channel is not monetized in any way. I do not in any way profit from bringing this story to anybody. In fact, I hope that this is another opportunity to tell Dennis's story in a simplified version and highlight a couple aspects about his trip, and more importantly, some of the discussions and philosophical and societal beliefs that came out of this. I know right off the bat, some of you might be thinking, okay, this is a long video, this is a little bit of a deep topic, but I promise if you stick with me, I'm going to give you a taste of some of the things that Dennis talked about in his ride report, and you're going to want to go and read this thing. One, because it's a pretty awesome story. Two, because the ride report is filled with really good nuggets of philosophy and observations about society, and none of it is negative. In fact, it's all very inspirational. So let's start from the beginning. I'll give you a quick background from what I understand about Dennis so that you kind of have a context about where he's coming from, why he may be doing what he's doing. the impression that I got from Dennis is that this is an individual who, at some point in his life, decided that the only way to truly better yourself is by challenging yourself. And in his case, he was doing it through a series of Ironman competitions, and was was a very athletic individual, somebody who worked extensively to conquer himself, his body, his mind, and there was a few different philosophies that came out of this. And at some point, a couple of years back, he was diagnosed and he was discovered that he had a brain tumor, and it was a fatal condition unless it was operated on. Doctors basically cut open the back of his skull, went in and performed surgery, removed the brain tumor, and saved the man's life. But shortly after this happened, things started falling apart for Dennis, of course, being faced with your own mortality, the prospect of being dead. And also he had some relationship fallout. And so this is a guy who was essentially starting over. You live your life up until the point where you are definitely facing imminent death. And then just how he describes it as the hairy hands of fate basically intervene and find a way to scoop all of the good things in your life and open the trap door from underneath you. So Dennis basically kind of hit a reset and decided that he was going to do something that was incredibly challenging, something he had never done before, and that was he wanted to transverse North America and basically spend 6 months living in completely different cities. And so he made all sorts of life adjustments, got his $11.99 Panigale, literally packed up a small bag of all of his belongings, and began riding across the United States, stopping in city after city, and then he would stay there for a period of a week to 2 weeks, and he was able to work remotely. So while this is happening, of course, he still has a job, he still has some professional obligations, but he's gone from his home, which was already up for sale. Essentially, he lived on his motorcycle. And throughout his journey, he managed to share different philosophies and observations about things. And you guys have all responded really well to a couple of my videos where I talk about, trying to keep confidence in yourself and trying to understand that everything in life happens for a reason, or maybe if you happen to believe that. And Dennis brings a very unique, but I would argue, at least in my case, it's a perspective that has permeated beneath the surface of sort of my daily life, but he articulated it in such a concise and well-packaged manner that I still haven't quite had a chance to really assimilate a lot of the really good pieces of information in the ride report that he put together. And I'm hoping that over the coming months I can really bring some of this stuff to you guys in a way that's a little bit more manageable and a little bit easier to digest. These are not my own ideas. Some of the stuff that I want to go over are actually Dennis's words. I'm going to post links to the ride report as well as his website. I want to make sure that I give full credit where credit is due. I am simply relaying some of the messages and maybe filling in tidbits of my own philosophy that kind of I feel coincides with him. So let's recap. So you have an individual who's in his early 40s who has just overcome facing imminent death. He has a long-term relationship that is over and basically is completely changing his life. And in fact, in the ride report, right before he leaves, Dennis actually talks about what he feels or what he predicts is essentially a suicide. Not in a literal sense, but in a figurative sense. And what he basically means is that he's going to leave one person and come back another individual completely changed. And you can understand why, because this is not a lifestyle that is shared by a lot of people. And And it's about how society shapes our ambitions and our desires, and how even something as simple as riding a motorcycle is really bucking the cultural norms. Everybody who, I can't say everybody, but we'll say almost everybody who has ridden a bike has at one point or another encountered an individual, whether they're family or their friends or a complete stranger or a coworker, who has been critical of the fact that they ride a motorcycle. Oh, my brother's dad's uncle's, grandson got into a motorcycle accident and blew his leg off, and everyone has a story like that. And a lot of it is because it's not a cultural norm. Not everybody rides a bike, and for various different reasons. But that all aside, you can at least relate to the fact that what Dennis is doing is highly unusual. But I think that that's why his perspective is so important, and some of the lessons that he talks about are equally important. And some of the basic themes that the Ride Report gives are summarized by Dennis's definition of his username, which is anti-hero. And when I think of an anti-hero as somebody who has had a prolonged interest in film and writing and storytelling, I think you always think of an anti-hero as the bad guy who does good things, whether by accident or on purpose, like the bad guy that you root for. Like for instance, like the one example that comes to mind is like Mel Gibson in Payback, or Dexter Morgan from Dexter. These are individuals who are essentially they're evil, they're bad guys, but they kind of do good things once in a while, and so they do take on sort of a heroic persona, but they're not good people. That's not how Dennis describes himself or his username. And the only reason I harp on this is because I feel it's a center point for what he does. How Dennis basically describes himself is the anti-hero is an ordinary person that does extraordinary things. And it's even his perspective that there are no extraordinary people. Now, I mean, we could possibly argue this point, talking about household names, Abraham Lincoln, Albert Einstein. But these were still people, these were still people that put their pants on one leg at a time. These are still people who had weakness. These are people who suffered, who had loss. So in some respects, Dennis's his point is very right on. And so I want to talk about the bike, because of course riding or touring on a sport bike is a difficult thing. I can't speak from experience, but people who I know who have toured have always mentioned that it's very difficult. The riding position, the length of time, all that stuff, And of course, people had questions about Dennis's choice in a motorcycle. Of all of the sport bikes that you could choose, you chose a brand new Ducati, and Ducatis are not exactly known for their mechanical soundness. They're very fussy bikes. And there are even recent vlogs of riders who have taken out Panigales, that are brand new, that have got very few miles on them, and they're hard to start and they spit. It's just part of the Ducati experience. So I'm going to read some excerpts from the Ride Report because it gets to one of the very first themes when it comes to talking about happiness, and how we really we don't necessarily look at happiness in the same way as he does. So he says, this is basically what he wrote. He's like, choosing a bike for a trip isn't unlike choosing what bike to purchase. Too many struggle with what they want versus what they think they should get. My advice has always been, get the fucking bike you lust after. Write the check, max the card, you won't regret it. Not everyone follows that advice, but anyone who's ever owned a bike understands that sentiment. the moment they are out cruising around and feel the pang of regret when someone goes by on the bike they really wanted. And so the same logic went into my decision on what bike I wanted to do this trip on, the bike that had to get my rocks off. Oh, I was apprehensive. New bike, strike one. New model Italian bike, strike two. Cross-country trip on a torture rack, strike three. Not a good idea. Actually, probably a really stupid idea. But it's the stupid things that we do that we remember the most. Too often, the good decisions we make, we forget or regret. But the stupid ones, those are the memory builders and the building blocks for great stories and adventures that make you smile and laugh years later. Additionally, the logic with the $11.99 was not to compromise my choice of bike and instead overcome the compromises that the Panigale would require of me. Too often, people don't factor into a decision as our outstanding abilities as humans to adapt to difficulty. The result of overcoming adversity and mastering one's ability to triumph over environmental challenges through persistence, determination, and imagination produce self-sufficiency and feelings of personal power, luxury, and security could never hope to provide. The harder the journey, the greater the cultivation of the will, and mastering one thing leads to greater proficiency on how to overcome challenges in other parts of our lives as well. In short, adaptation is the precursor to growth, and seeking out difficult, uncomfortable, and challenging situations accelerates development, enriches our lives, and provides us with the kind of awesome fucking memories that will sustain us until the final sleep rounds our little lives. That's a lot to take in. But I completely understand his perspective. The R1 for me was the bike that got my rocks off. Since I first saw one, I love the way it looks. I love the way it sounded. There's nothing about my bike that I particularly dislike. I like looking at it. I like riding it. I like thinking about it. I like listening to it. It's for me, it's all fantastic. My purchase reasons were a little different in that I knew eventually I was going to want one, and I wanted one bike that I could grow into, that I could learn, I wanted to know that motorcycle. I owned vehicles for a long period of time, but I get this perspective. And that is that, when it comes to motorcycles, it's like, get the bike you want. We make excuses, and yes, of course there's always going to be elements of financial responsibility and, not overextending yourself. But there really is an aspect of incredible happiness that comes from riding a motorcycle. And even more so when you can do it on the bike that you've always wanted. It's always that discussion of, do I get a 600? Do I get a 250? Or do I get 1,000? Go out and get the bike that you want. Get it. You will not regret it. It's not for everybody. But I think that anybody who has just bit the bullet, found the way, found the money, gone out and got it, I don't think any one of them are going to ever regret cutting that check every single month. That's sort of the introduction. And the aspects of happiness, trying to find out what it is that really gets you out of bed in the morning, is a theme that really goes through a lot of this ride report. There's one particular section about the ride report that I want to go over because it really gets to the aspects of dealing with challenges in our lives and dealing with the kinds of things that have a tendency to destroy lives or to start them. There's a particular... So as Dennis is going through his journey, he ends up over in New England. And he meets up with a guy who he identifies as Dr. J. And there's a particular aspect to the story that's really powerful because these are people, and in the case of Dennis too, I would argue, he describes Dr. J as a guy who has every reason to have given up on life or to have given up at some point in his life, and how that didn't happen. And you have to think about Dennis's position too, in that he had every reason to be upset and angry. I mean, even though you've survived a traumatic, life-threatening, illness or situation, there's every reason to pull back and say, gosh, I have to be very careful. I have to be very risk adverse because, I don't know how many years I have left. But the exact opposite happened. Dennis became more emboldened. And I want to read the specific section where he talks about, aspects of happiness. And he kind of starts by talking about accumulation of wealth because, of course, in this particular case, Dr. J is a very wealthy individual. It's very successful. And with recent discussions in the country about the rich versus the poor, or the rich versus the middle class, this is a really, really great discussion and a really awesome perspective. And I feel personally that if a good portion of America read this and understood this, their perspective on success and wealth would dramatically change the direction and the atmosphere that we have today. This is what Dennis wrote. He says, wealth begets wealth, poverty propagates poverty, and the middle class vacillate between the two, touching the fringes. Right or wrong, that's the way it goes. And the 99% hate the 1% due to a total misunderstanding of how one becomes a 1%er. There are all kinds of theories explaining why this is, but every now and then somebody at the poverty end of the spectrum rises up. Sociologists would probably explain this as an aberration that would allow them to protect their social or political views. But success is actually pretty simple, at least in America. Work hard, work smart, be educated, and yes, have a fuck adversity attitude. Basically, we are creatures of appetite. We want. But we also have aversions and fears. The end result of the battle between the two determines the course of action that we take. In simple terms, it can be summarized by the quote, I want to see every second of this movie, but I'm going to piss my pants if I don't get to the bathroom now. Most people know when to bum rush the urinals, but they don't really know what they're missing. The appetite aversion account, as applied to finances, can easily be distilled into the following formula. When your desire for a Ferrari is greater than your aversion to saving, working hard, getting an education, you'll own a Ferrari. Now, if this was a verbal one-to-one conversion, right about now the person I just said that would protest with a but, and that's where self-sabotage comes into it. Excuses. There are a bunch of them. I'm too old to go back to school. I don't have the time. I wouldn't want to give up my soul to work on Wall Street, etc. And when excuses win, you lose. Simple as that. And the screwed up thing about being human is that we have this special gift of being able to lie to ourselves in very, very convincing ways. We do it very, very well. The implications go way beyond wealth and poverty. Weight loss, staying in a bad relationship, why we're afraid of spiders. Basically, excuses are the things that keep us mired in the shit that we shat. The newsflash? Excuses don't exist in the real world. That's correct, my dear reader. Take any excuse you have and attack it. Test it. You'll be surprised at how thin these excuses are and how easily destroyed they can be. And you'll be surprised at how resilient and strong you are. This is a particular theme, breaking away for a second, that Dennis harps on, is that as an individual, we are immensely more powerful than we think we are. And the world is significantly less powerful than we think it is. I've always felt, and again, this is being very stereotypical, but that your average individual typically feels helpless against the world. There's only so much you can do. Only one person can't make a difference. The world is too big. It's too scary. It's too powerful. Dennis's perspective is that it's much the opposite. That we as individuals have incredible power over our own lives, and how the world itself is actually much less powerful than we think it is. And I bounced an idea off him that I got a really good response off of, which is my own personal philosophy when it comes to personal responsibility, is that I'm responsible for my position in life, good or bad. And yes, sometimes life kicks you in the balls when you're down, and shit happens, that kind of thing. But by and large, we're responsible for the things that happen to us. Relationships, all sorts of stuff. We're responsible for it, not someone else. And so that type of a philosophy to some is really scary, because accepting responsibility for your position in life means you're no longer a victim. And victim status carries a lot of inherent perks. I mean, if you're a victim of anything, a victim of sabotage, a victim of theft, whatever it may be, you're not responsible. You're absolved of responsibility. And victims can, people sympathize with victims. People feel sorry for victims. When you admit responsibility for your position in life, you lose that status. People feel that that's a bad thing. I actually have found in my own life that by accepting responsibility for the things that happen, both good and bad, that it actually brings a sense of control. I'm responsible for the things that happen to me, and therefore I'm in control of my own life. And that in itself, in my opinion, means that I'm liberated, because now I can do something about it. I can change things. I can, get out of the bad job. I can get out of a bad financial situation. I can get the things that I want, or I can meet the people that I want, or I can surround myself with the friends that care about me and who value me as an individual. I can do all those things, as opposed to thinking, well, the world is too big, it's too powerful. I'm stuck in this job. I'm stuck in this relationship. This is the best that I'll ever be. And that's all a lie. Those are excuses. So Dennis goes on, talking about Dr. J. And all this ties into Dr. J. Most people who see a guy driving a flashy car tend to think that somehow it was acquired easily. This is important. Underestimating the efforts others have had to expend makes it convenient for the rest of us to dismiss acquiring skills or objects as a possibility. Okay? Make sure I emphasize this. Underestimating the effort that others have had to expend makes it convenient for the rest of us to dismiss acquiring skills or objects as a possibility. That is huge. Absolutely huge, if you think about that. Think about all of the arguments that people have made about why they're not wealthy. Oh, the wealthy, they inherited it from their parents. They got it easily. They screwed people. They stole it. They lied and cheated. The wealthy helped the wealthy. All of these barriers that people build, because when the world is a big, scary place, and when the forces that exist, the corporations and the businesses, and they protect each other, and they're too big and they're too powerful, and you make all these excuses, it allows us to dismiss the possibility that we could ever be that way. Instead of saying, you know what, that was accomplished through the process of hard work and education and persistence, because those are things that we can all do. We can all work hard. We can all educate ourselves. We can all be persistent. We can all have initiative. It is within our grasp. These are qualities and capabilities that all of us have within us if we just search for them and work hard to achieve them. And when you really strip away the notion that the world is a big, scary place and it's all impossible, the only thing you're left with are your own excuses and your own mediocrity, if that's what you truly desire. So he goes on about Dr. J. He says, but this guy lived a hard life. He wasn't given shit. And in fact, he has every excuse in the world to have never achieved anything. I won't get into his personal details, but it's safe to say he's lived a rougher, more difficult childhood or adolescence than most. So how'd he get from where he was to where he is? Hard work and no fucking excuses. I'll repeat that again, because as simple as it is, I don't think most people really understand. Hard work, no excuses. And through it all, this guy has maintained this superhuman level of modesty and unbelievable sense of generosity and kindness. Blows my mind. Bottom line, the Dr. J lesson. Let fear be the deciding factor in deliberation, and you'll end up living in inescapable conditions. But pursue your appetites, follow your dreams, work hard, and confront both real and imagined adversity, and you'll live a life you wouldn't trade anything for. I'm not saying that the only road to happiness involves money. It doesn't, but it has its place. I'll swing my leg over a V-twin over stepping on a bus any day of the week. This is kind of the crux of what I wanted to talk to you guys about today. It has very little to do with money. That was just the particular subject that Dennis clamped onto because his friend Dr. J let him stay on his private, borderline yacht. He drives a GT3 RS Porsche. The guy has got lots of money. People saw that. And he was trying to really emphasize the fact that this guy worked hard for it. It is so easy for us to become disenfranchised with our position in life. I am no exception to this. And Dennis later in talks about the aspects of excuses, about how we build these prisons around ourselves and make excuses for why we don't go after the things that we want in life. Whatever your dream is, this notion that, when you get in your 30s and your 40s, you start to realize the things that you thought about in your 20s that you just can't do. It's all bullshit. And I know all of you out there right now are, you're yelling at the screen. It's not that easy. It's a lot harder than you say it is. There's this circumstance or that circumstance. Hey man, I hear it. I hear you. There's still excuses. Really, there's still excuses. I don't care what it is. It's an excuse. I still don't know exactly what I'm going to do with all this. And the thing that is incredible about this particular ride report, the things that have been written here, is that Dennis doesn't hold himself up to be a genius. These are simply things that he has come to accept philosophically through his own experiences, the things that he's read, and the rational thought that he's processed. It's the only way to start going down this road is to analyze your own life, is to analyze your life and to really be introspective about who you are and what it is that you want. And I have to dig it up, but I remember a specific quote about the unexamined life is not worth living. And we get so caught up with bills and jobs and family and friends and the small things in our life that we're not really tuned to sort of sit back and really look at ourselves and to really look at our life. And it takes a violent smack in the face sometimes before we stop and we really pause and look around us and ask the hard question, which is this where I really want to be right now? For some people, the answer may be yes, and that's okay. And understand that happiness is different for everybody. There are some people out there who all they want is to have a family, to have a husband or wife that loves them, to have, great kids, to serve on the PTA, to go to bake sales, to live in the white picket fence, on whatever variation of that exists. That's fine. It's going to be different for everybody. For some people, including Dennis, happiness for him is a nomad lifestyle. Meeting new people, seeing new places, never really being in the same place for a long period of time. That's happiness for him. The key to all of this is understanding what it is that you really want to do and then forming a plan to get there. And it doesn't mean, and of course we all get caught up in the big picture. It's very easy to get lost when you stare at a particular goal. And he uses an example of, running a marathon. Oh, I can't run a marathon, I die. You gotta start small. Start with a quarter of a mile, and work your way up. And understand that if you dismiss goals and if you dismiss achieving things because the distance between where you are and the goal you want to be at is huge, it is very easily to get discouraged, but you have to start somewhere. Anything like that is not going to be achieved overnight. Careers and wealth and success don't happen overnight for many people. And arguably, the people who do achieve things like wealth and success overnight never really handle it well because they never learn to appreciate it and manage it. I mean, this is why people who win the lottery, by and large, blow through all of their cash and they end up with nothing, or they destroy their lives because they're not accustomed and disciplined to be able to handle all of this wealth and success all at once. It takes cultivation, it takes time, but that could be applied to anything in your life. Whether it's a job, whether it's any type of a situation or a dream that you want to achieve, is if it was just given to you, you would most likely mismanage it because you didn't get the experience of working through and sort of sacrificing and I would argue suffering to a certain extent to get that thing that you want, whether it's a circumstance, a person, or money, or whatever it is. And Dennis's trip across the United States has served as an inspiration for a lot of people, including myself. And it's a demonstration of looking at something that you want to do and doing it, finding a way to do it, clawing your way through the crap to do it, and not making excuses. And he's not done. This ride report was drafted like a couple of years ago, and since then he's on the cusp of traveling Europe and possibly Asia. I mean, the man is looking to looking to ride across the planet on a Ducati, which is insane, but awesome because he's not going to make any excuses. He's not sitting around going, "Oh God, I don't know if I can do this." He's like, "I'm going to do it. I'm going to find a way." How do you translate this into your own life? It's going to be different for everybody. And this is a lot to take in. And I understand this is a long video. And if you've managed to stick with me for this long, I really appreciate it. I still haven't quite been able to assimilate all this. But I have read through this report and I have had to sort of sit back and I have had to really absorb the things that I was reading. Because these are things that I really believe. But I've never really heard it this way before. And it's always great to see a very fresh perspective on even some of the things that I find myself nodding my head with. And looking for opportunities to break out of my shell and looking for opportunities to go after the things that I want and really trying to, again, be introspective and self-examining. And some people will dismiss this as pointless intellectualism, that you're just thinking about things to think about them and you're over-examining, you're over-analyzing. But folks, life is complicated. We're complicated creatures. And you really do need to try and take the time to look at the situation around you and ask yourself, is this where you want to be? If it is, that's great. Find a way to protect it. Find ways to insulate it. Find ways to make sure that you can be in that situation for as long as possible. For those of you out there who have things that you want to do, have dreams and aspirations, places you want to go, people you want to see, things you want to do, you can do it. I'm telling you that you can. And the reason why I've grasped onto this so much is because in some very simple way it cultivates my relationship with this bike. I had a lot of people tell me I couldn't ride this bike. I have a lot of people today that tell me I can't ride this bike. I'm not saying that I'm an expert. I'm very far from it. But right off the bat, you're too fat. You'll kill yourself. It's too big of a bike. Yada, yada, yada. And I attribute a lot of my success to the engineering and design of the bike. I'm not here trying to tell you that I'm responsible solely. But folks, I made a decision. I'm getting this bike. I'm fucking learning to ride it. I don't care what anybody says. And I mean, I've already crashed it once. And even in that moment, I didn't let it stop me. I was not deterred. That bike ran. I was right at home. I could have been stubborn. I mean, and I have, and that you can probably chalk that up to stubbornness. But nobody would have blamed me if I would have quit. No one would have blamed me if I would have said, I can't get back on this thing. This bike is too much for me. I have to get rid of it. No one would have blamed me. But I didn't. And it's not because I'm special or superhuman or, talented. It's just because I refuse to give up. I don't care how hard it is. I'm going to do this thing. And I just want to share this perspective with all of you out there who are so gracious to watch my videos, because this is an important message. There are so many people who are trapped in situations that they're desperately just begging and crying to break out of. But you've walled yourself in. You have built these prisons around yourself. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not good looking enough. I'm not talented enough. And I'm telling you, the problem with building your own prisons and locking yourself inside is you are the only one who has the key to break yourself out. Only you can. You see all of these, these shows about interventions and sitting down little Johnny. And little Johnny's got a drug problem, and his family says, little Johnny, we love you. We want you to stop doing cocaine and sniffing and snorting and banging all of those crazy hookers. That's great. It's wonderful that people have family and friends and support systems that can sit there and say, look, what you're doing is not good. And I'm not saying you're all out there, doing hookers and blow. But I'm saying that even in the worst of situations, it could be weight loss. It could be bad relationships. It could be a terrible job. Only you have the capability and the power and control to break yourself out of the prison that you built for yourself. Your wife or husband can't do it. Your brother or sister, your mom and dad, your kids, your pastor, nobody can make the decision to unlock that door and walk out, except for you. And the longer you stay in that prison, the longer you're going to be miserable. So, the takeaway from all of this is the fact that whether it's myself, or whether it's Dennis, whether it's you, doesn't matter. None of us are extraordinary individuals. None of us are necessarily blessed with one-ups, or we all have talents. And in fact, there was a lot of argumentation towards Dennis about, well, there are some people that are just smarter, and there are some people that are just more talented. And yes, that is true. Talents make tasks and things easier. Some people have talent with writing. Some people have talent with art or with mathematics. But everyone is a compromise. Every person is a compromise. That's why people, if you've ever met anybody who's highly intellectual but can't do the simplest tasks, or they're socially awkward, or people that are really good with words and they're excellent with people, but they make these stupid decisions and they just can't think logically about things. Everyone is a compromise. Everybody has something they're good at, but it takes away sometimes from the things that other people are good at. And we look at these individuals and we're like, wow, how possibly could you be that dumb? You can make all these computations, but you can't do the simple thing. Or people who are highly rational but stunted emotionally. Everyone's a compromise. And the key is that everyone can do anything that they want. You just have to have the desire to do it. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to necessarily be able to be a MotoGP racer or a Formula One driver or an astronaut. But let's face facts. The dreams and ambitions that we all have typically fall a little bit below those levels. Just because you can't be a MotoGP rider doesn't mean that you can't compete in amateur racing. It doesn't mean you can't have your own race team. It doesn't mean you can't have a race bike. It doesn't mean you can't ride on the track. Just because you can't be a culinary master chef doesn't mean that you can't cook great food. Just because you can't, being the next Stephen King or a great philosopher doesn't mean that you can't write or produce really great films. I mean, why, those of us who are motovloggers are not exactly having the doors beat down by major production studios, but that doesn't mean that we still can't produce great content. Folks, you have to find what you want to do in life and then just go out and get it. And you have to take it. But and Dennis describes this way. He's like, the aspect of, follow your dreams. It's very fluffy. About dreams are things that need to be stalked. They need to be attacked. They need to be ravaged. They need to be torn apart. You need to devour them. That's what really needs to happen with the things in life you want. So, read the Ride Report. Really absorb the information. Think a lot about your life. Think a lot about the things that you're doing. And ask yourself if this is really where you want to be. Because if you want to be somewhere else, it's time to bust out of your prison. All you got to do is take that key out, stick it in the fucking hole, and turn it, and open the door, and walk out. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be pretty hard, I might add. But what's harder is being miserable and staying right where you're at. So I hope that you'll follow me as time goes on, as I find a way to integrate a lot of these philosophies into my own life. I don't know how. I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know what's going to happen. But I've been thinking a lot about this. And I hope you guys will too. So, thanks for hanging out with me tonight in the garage. Thanks for listening. I know this is a really long video, but I really appreciate your guys' time. I hope you enjoyed this. Everybody have a great night, and I'll talk to you later.